revealed that...
Fuck!
Yeah, what?
I wasn't recording.
We know.
Fuck. But what... Did I record any of it? Just have to start again. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. Let's go. At least we've got the initial...
This is a very husband's moment.
It really is.
We've just...
She just wrestled on
I've
the
just
floor.
let you down. So we just recorded 5 minutes of the podcast and then I wasn't recording.
All our best. I think that was some of the most incisive cultural commentary of like the malaise of 70s.
We were talking about
cinema.
the malaise of 60s and 70s.
American culture.
American culture and the West in general. In the context of Mikey and Nicky, which is a film by Elaine May, starring John Cassavetes and Peter Falk as two mobsters. Cassavetes' character is sort of a mercurial, difficult friend who's paranoid and crazy and desperate in a hotel room, and his long-suffering supporting buddy, Nicky.
Yeah, probably Nicky.
Played by Peter Falk, comes and helps him out.
Yeah, gets him out of a desperate bind, and he is a long-suffering friend who puts up with John Cassavetes' paranoia and delusions without, as it transpires in the film, it's actually Peter Falk who is one who's tasked with bringing Nicky in to kill him.
Yeah.
We don't realise this for perhaps 3/4 of the film. So for the most part, what it then hones in on is Peter Falk obviously in a torment because of his connection with his friend, whether or not he's able to do it. So
there's a very real sense of friendship, but there's also like an emergent, deliberate betrayal.
Frustration,
also
There's moments of betrayal, disappointment, rejection, which lead him away from saving John Cassavetes and deciding to actually, he's going to kill him. It's almost like he gives John Cassavetes a lifeline in the film, and he basically takes him on this Odyssean wandering through these quite bleak, unidentifiable edgelands of New York. There's none of the... I think the film begins in quite an unpleasant part of like downtown Manhattan and gradually goes out to probably like Jersey City, Newark, all these kind of like... It's shot entirely on location at night.
Yeah.
In maybe some bars in this grimy hotel. It's locationless, as they are. They're kind of drifting through this long dark night of the soul.
There's this idea running through it that he's going to help his friend escape and get on a plane and go somewhere.
And he offers him
never
that.
happened. He offers him that, but of course it never quite happens. They never quite make it out of New York.
Escape from New York too.
Exactly, and he's hot on his trail. Meanwhile, we are, as like a kind of film studies class, we are doing a comparative reading of this film between Mikey and Nicky, directed by Elaine May, starring John Cassavetes and Peter Falk. We are comparing it with Husbands, directed by John Cassavetes, starring John Cassavetes and Peter Falk, and we're going to throw in a bit of Ben Gazarra just
chuck him in there.
And so these are three friends. They're all husbands, as the title suggests. They've all got families. Harry, who's played by Ben Gazarra, has a particularly difficult family life at the moment.
He's the only one whose family life we actually see.
Exactly. Well, we see the Cassavetes' character, Gus's family life just in the final scene, but not in any meaningful way. They decide to go to London, so half the film is set in London. They have this sort of desperate escapade.
We've missed out an important thing. The reason they go on this kind of cross-continental sprawling bender is because they attend the funeral of their best friend. This was originally a group of 4, and they basically lost one of their leading, one of their brothers, as it were. And this death, like all deaths, kind of triggers a moment of reflection and self-analysis. And for them, because they're quite fragile and uncertain, and they're middle-aged, it causes this crisis of confidence that leads them to go on this quite eventually very abstract, tiring, hungover bender, but at first is like extremely energetic. It's like the entropy works on this film. It goes. It's really enthralling and energetic. Their play acting. It literally begins with them, kind of going to a health center, like a sports venue, and changing into sweatsuit right after the funeral.
They go for a swim.
They go for a swim. They play basketball.
So hopeful,
and then just gradually
they end up in a bar singing and shouting.
Well, actually, because that's the thing. It's like it's almost like the New Year's resolution. This year I'm going to get fit. And they kind they literally go to a gym and do that. Then next they're at this bar just getting absolutely wrecked. Then they're literally shitting and vomiting in the toilets. And then they just kind of like gradually, the old selves reassert themselves, basically. The old kind vices. The old vices. It's the iron rule of institutions and people. They kind of they cannot escape the people they are, and kind of a meteor kind of orbiting a planet eventually kind of is sucked down and crashes on the surface of it. But that's kind of like
a sci-fi film.
Sci-fi film, literally that happens. So that's because you chose these two films.
Yes,
because you found that there was some interesting or potentially interesting kind of interlacing between them.
I think they're quite unconventional script-wise. I mean, they have a narrative structure, particularly Mikey and Nicky, which revolves around this hunt basically for the main character. But they're also languid. They're long. Mikey and Nicky is only 100 minutes, but Husbands is 2.5 hours, and it spends a lot of that runtime is basically quite long, open-ended scenes between the three men where they are squabbling, or these kind of these Cassavetes. I'm now finding them to be Cassavetian scenes, sex scenes that have this corrosive, coercive, desperate, energy to them, which, I mean, in Mikey and Nicky, it's very explicit because they're having sex with a prostitute who is completely insane and will only have sex if you say I love you to her. And Cassavetes goes through this and says I love you, and then like nuts inside her, and then does his fly up, and then while Peter Falk is like watching, sitting on a bin in the kitchen, and then he walks in and tries to get his money's worth and gets bitten and smacked in the face, and then this causes this rift, this jealousy, this the film is full of this resentment and distrust and betrayal, but also all these characters need each other. They always end up coming back to each other. Like the very final scene, I won't give away the spoiler, but there is a moment of banging on the door. Please,
I thought we are pro-spoiler.
We are pro-spoiler, but this is not a necessary spoiler.
John Cassavetes is, wait for it, if you don't want to know, fuck you. John Cassavetes is ultimately killed. He's murdered. The mob eventually gets him. There's a tortured moment at the end where Peter Falk loses him in the street, joins the hunt to find Cassavetes and kill him. But there's still an element of is he trying to get there first so he can save him? Goes back to his house.
Cassavetes is Nicky and Peter Falk is Mikey. Let me get that right.
So Mikey goes home to his kind of quite strange, distant, odd wife. Yeah. But they have a very pleasant home.
Yeah, it's all very conventional.
Nicky comes to his house, and the mobsters are waiting there because he said he might come back to his house, but he doesn't let him in.
Yeah, and by not letting him in, he condemns him to death.
Yeah, and that's the whole film. The friendship is painted in very mortal terms, because literally the friendship, if the friendship can survive, it's coherent and strong and stable enough, Nicky will survive. He will live. At the end of this film, he'll be alive and he will escape and he'll keep his life. If the friendship can't survive the pressures, and that as far as Nicky's concerned, or Mikey and Nicky concerned, the pressures aren't insane because he can easily escape at any point. But Nicky is unable, again, this gravitational metaphor, unable to escape. The whole film, the first thing he should be doing is getting on a plane and getting the fuck out of New York. Yeah. What he does instead is he goes to a bar, he tries to chat up a woman, he gets into a fight with some locals in the bar, he goes to a cinema, he does and then visits his prostitute. He does everything he can. He can't escape the city. He can't walk away from it. And I mean, like both films are quite, I suppose, cynical in that sense, because they posit the inescapability of our own fate, the inescapability of our own selves. We can't escape
and
ourselves.
A constant deferral. I mean, these films both feel like, being stuck in bed or something.
Yeah.
They feel like this thing of,
you want to get up.
where you're like, it's quarter to 9:15. I guess by 9 I'll get up, and then it's like 9:15. You're like, oh, I was just watching something on YouTube. There's like that feeling running, but the stakes are much higher. It's much more desperate.
Yeah.
We were talking about these films both feeling like hangovers, and maybe it being significant that they were made in the 70s, which feels like a kind of
cultural
hangover from the 60s, where much more was sort of alive and possible. Obviously, it's 1968. Crucial kind of political turning point for I guess the left or young people in
the film, definitely
in the West,
is drinking that poisoned broth, post 68 broth, without referencing it. I think it exists in the same malaise and the same halted, interrupted future, which it came after that period.
Yeah, totally.
Sorry, you were saying.
No, just there's so many different aspects.
Hangover, that was the word you were using.
Hangover, yeah. There's so many different aspects to this. Aesthetically, I guess we just sort of shout out like the sound in Husbands is really bad. I was like quite annoyed that can't always hear what they're saying. There's a lot of, as is typical of Cassavetes, long lens, grainy sort of this is the DSLR of the 60s and 70s. He was a pioneering indie filmmaker, and the sort of what would now be a kind of like aliasing of the Canon 7D. You have this horrible lens flare and kind of like grain.
But I think it there's an element where I think that's a constraint of the equipment that he's shooting on, probably a relatively low budget, but it does help prop up, form and content, like you were saying. It does help prop up the
it's woozy.
It's woozy, it's hungover, it's too raw, the footage. It's all in this very flat, raw, kind
often
of
not
flat
in focus
colour, very grey. Yeah, the focus is being pulled completely in the wrong direction. Often really odd bits of people. Partly that's aided by the fact that the actors are constantly swirling and moving and tussling and jolting in front of the frame. It's very disorienting. And it means that the focus is kind of alighting on somebody's shoulder and then like a leaf behind them, and it's frustrating. It's really annoying and kind of stabilizing. You feel like you've got this horrific hangover, but you're still at your laptop trying to work. You're trying to focus on something and trying to get your shit together, and that's what the film feels like. Whether that was an intentional thing or not, I feel like the aesthetic strategy complements the actual tensions and contradictions of like the film beautifully. Yeah,
it's very unified, and I wondered about that because there were moments stylistically where it contrasted. So like there's an amazing moment inside the house when the argument is happening between Harry, Ben Gazarra's character, and his family, his mother-in-law and his wife, where someone his wife pulls out a knife and he slaps her, and it's just really horrible.
He slaps the mum and his wife. It's quite insane, double whammy. And then but there's a moment halfway through this scene before it escalates, to its highest point, where he walks out of the house and there's just like a still wide shot of like his two friends, sitting on
Gus
the
and Archie.
Grass almost.
So sitting on the grass, almost like straight out of
yeah, it's like an album cover.
It's like a perfect album cover of these, and it's very Hollywood. It's very like composed, and that's quite a rare moment of like where you see all this chaos sort of reduced down to this like more cirky and kind of like Hollywood stillness. But for the most part, especially in these kind of crazy nights, there's also this casino scene which has no background music at all and very little.
It feels like the Hotel California. It feels like this kind of ghost ship. There's no sound.
Strange.
There's not even the sound of dice or roulette wheels clicking. It's completely swollen with silence. It's
like a void. It's very strange, and
it's full of all these very decrepit octogenarian characters.
There's like a dowager. What would you say? A dowager. An old English lady who offers. She says this weird thing with her mouth, a bit like Gordon Brown, and she's like, "All right, do you want girls? Do you want? Your hand is on my hand."
I can satisfy you.
I can get you girl. You want boys? You want boys?
Is it Elephant Man now? I'm a human being. You want boy?
It's very I mean as Londoners we were a bit irked by the portrayal of London as a rainy place.
It is shitting it down the whole
full
time.
of ugly old women offering you prostitutes. Yeah, we thought that wasn't quite accurate. At least not the rainy bit.
No, but in that moment, that's an excellent scene because it's like they're these brash Americans out of their context and they want to throw their money around. But it's this insanely, because we know their actual lives are they're successful. One of them's a dentist. One of them, I think, is an ad guy. They're successful bourgeois, but they're not insanely successful. They've not met their ambitions in their life. They have this moment of reflection at the very beginning of the film. We're on the subway back from the funeral. And it's this, again, it's 70s New York, so the subway looks like shit. It still does. And greatest city on earth, baby. And they're on the subway, and it's just they're talking about their kind of failings about. They're listing all the sports that they will never succeed at, and talking about their aches and pains in their bodies. But it's still at that time a kind of element of hope. But by this scene in the casino, it's just the false, the kind of shabby falseness of their money. The fact that they kind of get these women, we can talk more, I think that's a quite crucial scene, but the kind of women they're talking to there and trying to basically flirt with in these really desperate, sad ways, not quite convincing these women. Their desperation, they reek of desperation and kind of
the thing Cassavetes captures so well is this moment where a man goes up to a woman and makes a very unconvincing pass, and the woman is convinced anyway.
Yeah, partly because it's the two desperations.
The two desperations interlock. It's very Fassbinder. I mean, Cassavetes and Fassbinder are kind of quite, thematically at least, very similar. Yeah. And I think there is that moment, with the tall English girl where he's like, "Oh, do you want to hear some? I speak a bit of Italian." She's like, "Oh, I don't speak Italian." It's like, you know what is? How about I love you? I love you.
It's completely bait and it's like the worst.
And she's like, "Oh, okay," and she sort of smiles, and then they go back to the hotel, and it's just sort of like everyone in this situation is not living their best life, and yet some form of pleasure is possible, but also things can go at any moment. Things can go incredibly dark. And you can, there's this amazing bit where Archie, played by Peter Falk, kind of he's got involved with this underage Chinese girl, and he's like, "Hey, Gus, I'm in terrible trouble emotionally."
Yeah, he falls in love with her despite. Yeah, I mean, in that scene is quite interesting. So,
she can't say a word of English.
No,
has said nothing and kisses him in this very artificial way.
Kisses him in this very unpracticed way. Yeah. She's a virgin, obviously. Because there's one of the great scenes is they convince these three women to come back to their quite customless hotel. Just very kind of heavy furniture and kind of blankness, and it's raining and they're all soaked. Like the last hour of the film, everyone's constantly wet, not like in a sexual way, sense, no, in just a drowned from rain sense. You can smell the wet wool, you can smell the heaviness of the rooms. And they take these women back to the hotel. The women don't really seem particularly convinced, but they're there anyway. The men don't seem particularly convinced. There's a real wall of silence between them. The ad man, what's his name? Harry starts crying, weeping. And it's a great moment where most of his body is off scene and one of the women is off scene. It kind of alludes to the possibility that she's like sucking him off or something, because you hear these little groans and moans. But then the camera pans and you realise she's just weeping.
And then there's another moment where the English woman is like trying to de-stress the Gus, Cassavetes' character, and she like massages him, while he's kind of bent over. There's just these strange moments of women just being like, okay, then I'll
being completely at disposal.
I'll just look after this fucking idiot man who can't look after himself.
And the men don't have to do much to be impressive at this point. The women come back with them, and yet they all fall apart. Peter Falk, again, the kind of ambivalence of these scenes is that, they call room service, or Harry calls room service and orders like Bell's whiskey, bottle of Bell's whiskey. It takes ages ordering this elaborate Belgian salad, which is a really great little detail with like lemon and oil dressing or something in them. when they kind of look around, like, does anyone want soup? And then the absurdity of ordering soup when you're about to like midnight and you're about to have sex or something is obviously like incredible. But then obviously like looks over to the young underage Chinese girl, and it says, mentions drink, and Peter Falk, who's kind of attached onto her, is like, no drink. Yeah, she'll have a Coca-Cola, but then obviously, but then no, obviously that's morally incorrect. But then tries to like rape her basically, and then rejects her because he rejects her because she can't kiss because she's never kissed anyone before. And then yet the next day...
because she's trying to get it over with, really. She's not really
of course.
Putting her heart and soul into it.
And then the next day declares that he's crazy about this girl who obviously like
that's mad. I mean, that's delusion. So desperate. The whole thing is just... It's painful to watch. It's a very bleak and drab and wet...
You were standing up by the end.
Yeah.
Because you were so irritable.
My legs were feeling a bit like... everything about the film is kind of like achy and dissatisfying. I was sitting in, unfortunately, Owen... We were on a sofa now, but...
Sorry.
We were sat in Owen's office and I was on like 2 different uncomfortable chairs.
I'm sorry about the uncomfortable chair. I mean, I had a very comfortable chair. I was being a bad host and didn't give it up.
No, I would have done the same. I am in general a selfish person.
Yeah. That was a very
but I've got the better headphones on now.
That's true, actually. I mean, when we do this podcast in the future, we'll do it on the sofa. Like we'll watch on the sofa. I just hadn't had my DVD player set up. Anyway. Blu-ray. So yeah, there are moments of incredible desperation. It's almost like it is the there's something about it which is that films today a similar film today would really question. It would be men who are desperate to have sex and are rejected by women. This film is obsessed with men who can't almost get it up. These men, I don't think any of them consummate.
I mean, it's got, in that sense, it's got this Eyes Wide Shut energy. Eyes Wide Shut is like most memorably a film about a guy who can't have sex.
It's about Tom Cruise not being able to have sex.
Like not even like he has in situations where he nearly has sex, and then there's some narrative obstacle occurs
because he wants it too much.
Yeah,
he wants to be allowed into this grand secret palace of carnal delight, where people fuck. But his desperation to fuck is what constantly trips him up.
Yeah, and in this film, it's about these guys. The real romance is obviously between them, but it's so complicated as a romance. It's so full of like kind of resentment and irritation and a kind of I guess it's like there's an incel. I don't know. I'm now going down the masculinity. Discourse.
No, because I don't think it's a film about masculine. I don't think it's a film really about like masculine fragility or male fragility. I think it's about desperation.
Yeah, it's a film about being stuck, and it's a film about being. Inceldom was started by a woman, but and it's
and only a woman can finish it.
And it's about like the situation of being united by stasis, being united by a kind of this film Husbands, it's about like, why do they stick together? Why do they, there's this amazing bit in the street where they're kind of brawling with each other, and then Harry's like, I've decided I'm going to go to London, and they're like, well, hey, what, I'm going to go to London, and then Archie's like, hey, if you're going to London and you're going to London, I guess I'm going to London, And
then for a minute there was this boiling, simmering horror between them, and now they're all kissing each other, and they're celebrating their own distractions. Yeah, totally. Both of these films are films about people not addressing the thing they need to address. Yeah. They are diverting and taking like the long way round. And the thing is that is never going to take them anywhere. Obviously, Mikey and Nicky similarly is the one thing that could end the torment of both of the characters is Mikey leaving New York. He does not do that. They go on this endless it's like fucking Dante. They go in this dark forest of the soul. They plunge down and they can't divert themselves. There's this constant wandering into situations where they almost he's constantly almost about to be killed by this assassin who's like doggedly but not particularly competently chasing him.
He's chasing him. Horrible.
Because that's the comedy. It's like he's like this Buster Keaton-esque assassin who's actually a bit shit because he's never there on time, or he turns up too late, or they've already moved on by the time he gets to the location. Like,
so at every level there's like failure.
Yeah,
there's
the
human
exit
failure.
strategy, exactly. The exit strategy is clear for them. Like everything that's it. Everything about this film sets them up to succeed, and yet they cannot. Same with
that's the essence of masculinity.
Yeah, like the tools to be self-fulfilled or to be happy are there. It's just impossible to achieve.
Yeah. There's no.
I think that's something both films share.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the films share so much. I suppose it's Mikey and Nicky is a bit more pristine. It's like stylistically a little less bold, but it has these kind of beautiful eruptions. It is, it's films where people men in particular are allowing themselves to be as kind of honestly horrible as they can be. And I think that, maybe we lack that a bit in our culture. I don't lament the loss of whatever you call it, toxic masculinity. I hate that word, but the films that way of existing as a man still exists and will exist forever, I believe, and it's not shown in our culture as much as it is in these films. Even Stalker by Tarkovsky, I feel like, has a lot of this energy. That energy of like guys being around each other, getting a bit pissed off with each other, being rude, being like, talking about wanting to get their dick sucked, like that kind of like
pretty much. And even there, another kind of parallel is that they locate the source of fulfillment and yet hit another block. They are immobilized by the
stalker.
This is something all these films share. And again, I don't think
Husbands and Stalker are the same film. They have the same running time as well, actually.
The same running time. They both go to London, the Zone. Let's call it.
Wait, I missed the London bit of Stalker.
It's all
every set, all 10 times I've seen it.
Yeah. There is a degree of, I guess, loneliness that brings these people together.
Yeah.
It's a very age old thing, which is like the apex predator, realizes there are no more lands to conquer. Yeah. These men, in theory, have everything, all the building blocks of a kind of happy, fulfilled existence, and yet they have nothing except each other.
Yeah, and they're looking for love in all the wrong places, right? Like the love that they have is kind of, or the place where love should live is this kind of prosaic nuclear family conventionality that doesn't really sort of, either it's a huge inconvenience or impingement on their happiness, or it just is like sort of neutral. Or
they can't frame the question of what they want. That's the problem.
Yeah. And so they sort of try and find romance with each other, adventure and excitement. But of course it's tinged by all these, the fact that they're united by a kind of cynicism, a kind of resentment.
I think there's an interesting cynicism
about
addiction,
basically.
An addiction, because alcohol is the big, is the kind of third character, the third eye in all these films. I think, again, about this kind of entropy, this entropic nature of husbands in particular, is that by the end of the film, there's this kind of particularly bleak night with these three women all in these three separate rooms. All of them, they maybe struggle to consummate, or Gus, who gets with this kind of posh English tall woman. For a long time, there's this I think they probably fucked, but there's this kind of ambivalence about them. They're fighting for a long time, and it's kind of skirting this kind of edge of violence and coercion.
Yeah.
But neither of them, and both of them are equally compelled and repulsed by the situation. Yeah. This happens the next day. It's still gushing down with rain. And Harry is back in his room, but he's brought three more women back, and he's kind of it's like Nero fiddling while Rome burns. He's there, and he looks like shit. His shirt is wet, and he's got more champagne out. The room is full of cigarette smoke. There's rain just pouring against the window. It's really artificial.
There's a range of generations.
There's like a young girl, kind of woman in her 30s and woman in her 50s or something. And it's almost like daughter, mother, wife, mother, almost in this room.
They seem happy.
But it's so desperately sad. This scene. It's just so cold and flat, and he's trying to make them dance and sing. And it's just, by that point, it's flatlined. He's brought all these things together, and it's just so delusional.
There is something immensely satisfying, but it's a little bit. It reminds me almost of like Abigail's Party or something, by Mike Lee, or like just sort of film depictions of like everyone saying they're having a lovely time, but like it's not good. And there's like that sort of situation. It's a very beautiful thing to watch, but also you think like the getting drunk in the bar and singing for ages, and like this is something that Cassavetes does so well. I mean, he does it. He reaches its apex of this in Love Streams, which some people don't like because it's kind of the am I using this correctly? The Cassavetes film. Because it's so much. It's just all of the themes that he's most preoccupied by, like condensed.
He allows his characters to be more brilliant. Love Streams, though.
And in Love Streams, those characters are like. I mean, there's an amazing scene where Gina Rowlands like says like, "I'm going to perform for you. I'm going to be a clown." Like, and she does all these clowning things in front of her children, and they just like not laughing. They're not finding it funny. And
again, desperation.
And it's like total, desperation to be loved. And then she like jumps in the pool. It's like it's an extraordinary performance. It's really amazing.
It's truly amazing. But the thing with
only Cassavetes can bring out that like fucking jagged, hysterical, mad, desperate energy.
But they are brilliant people in Love Streams. And the difference here is these are quite unremarkable people.
Yeah.
They have I suppose.
Yeah, they're taking a holiday from their unremarkable lives and becoming remarkable briefly.
Yeah. Whereas, but in Love Streams, be it the kind of the animals, the zoo that he assembles, there's all these things about it which are quite Godardian in a way, like Père Le Fou. It's got that kind of similar energy of this kind of breaking away from society and its norms. There's a bit of that because these men are acting like children. Yeah. And they are acting in a kind of unconventional and boyish way, and it's very delightful when they are vibing completely together as friends. It's a joy to watch because it is so funny at the beginning. It's so funny when there's a scene where they're all in the toilet, which is probably the most honest scene in the film, is where they're all in the toilets of this dive bar. They've just been singing together. It's probably like 5 a.m. and they're just shitting and vomiting together. It's just
the sounds,
violent sounds.
The sounds are so violent.
It's incredible, and they are literally in the same stool at one point, hugging and shitting and vomiting. And then
one of them says, "I'm going to go off." I think it's Archie says he wants to go off, and then Harry says, "You're going to go off? What? There were 4 of us, now there's 3 of us. Now you want to be alone?" Like this real neediness. It's like wow,
neediness. To literally share. To be shitting while you're like vomiting and shitting while your friends embracing you. It's like it's a real moment of like it takes it down to the very corporeal need to be literally, if you were writing, I guess, like a film studies paper, it would be about the need to be proximate to other people's effluence and shit and bodies, because that's how desperate you are to be integrated with these other people and to become whole with these other people. From that point on, it really begins to unravel because they are supportive of each other at that point. They are kind of aligned. Because there's a moment where Archie, Peter Falk, has this kind of dark moment where he begins to get quite myopic and self-reflective and begins to spiral, but they kind of laugh and pull him out of it. Later in the film, they can't do that to each other. They become equally resentful.
It's too far gone. They're all too miserable.
Which might, and then you've got Mikey and Nicky. They ultimately fight, which precedes Falk making the decision to allow, as it were, Nicky to die. It's stirring, but Husbands was a hard watch.
It was a hard watch, a long watch, but also ultimately like a film that resonated, I think, with both of us.
Yeah.
It's just in terms of like that abandon. I don't think I've been in that place. That only very fleetingly. But like it was like nice to see. It was like refreshing to see that I think there is like, as a man, there is that bit of you that is like, that is like fucking staring down the barrel of like of the glass, I guess, looking like, it's rock bottom basically.
Yeah, they've all hit rock bottom.
These guys have hit rock bottom, and I think that's like what Cassavetes and Fassbinder, since I mentioned him earlier, like what they achieve so beautifully is like a real honest depiction of like what that rock bottom looks like. Yeah, I think that's valuable. Mikey and Nicky raises the stakes on that rock bottom and makes it. Mikey and Nicky's maybe like a more accessible film because
it's a question of life and death.
It uses a kind of crime film structure as a metaphor that allows us to understand their friendship, whereas Husbands is quite literally just some friends going on an adventure. But they're both sort of films that like confront us with the question of like what brings us together. There was a great I watched the Louis C.K. special that he did after he was.
Haven't heard that name in a long time.
Yeah. Well, obviously he was his first, like, it was self-released special. After.
That was his problem, self-release.
Yeah. Very good. You get some sort of award for that.
Thank you.
So he put out this hour-long stand-up thing that he did, where he addresses the controversy, his cancellation, and at one point he says, where these things happen, they always say, you find out who your real friends are, and he says, I wouldn't recommend that. he's like, it's never the cool friends. It's never the ones you want.
No, I mean, it's a valid point, because these people do not cohere. They do not slide together well. We even realize, when to go to husbands, Mikey and Nicky, is that when we realize Peter Falk, who he calls, it turns out through the film that he hasn't been returning Peter Falk's calls recently. He hasn't even seen it that long. He hasn't seen him for long enough time to notice. I think he remarks like Nicky's lost weight or something. Like enough time has elapsed. They're childhood friends. How close are they in each other's lives, really? But in that moment, he thought that the only person he could call was Peter Falk. And actually, Peter Falk does respond. He brings the medicine that he needs for his stomach ulcer. This is the man, by the way, he's actually also trying to hunt this guy down. He brings in his stomach ulcer tablets. What better vision of codependence and kind of, as it were, toxic codependence as someone that is setting out to kill you, but also brings your stomach medicine along.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it is in the devil's in the detail, or rather the kind of kindness is in the detail. He does he's conscientious, but it is almost compensating for like a wider malevolence.
Well, that's it, because we see that as well at the end of Husbands. When they returned from their several days long night of the soul, they go to return to their families. Apart from Harry, obviously, who's kind of had this atrocious split with his wife. And what we see here is they bought loads of. Again, the gesture is supposed to be sappy and empty. They bought loads of bags of cuddly toys from like the airport, and Peter Falk is judiciously looking through each of their bags to make sure they've got all the right toys. And then there's this moment. It's this desperate. It's like buying wilted flowers from a petrol station, right? To apologise for shagging someone else to your wife. They get home, and then the child very accusingly. This Jacques moment points across the yard to Gus and says, you're in trouble. And it's this moment of like, that they are truly like lost, and no gesture they can do can solve, no cuddly toy is going to fill the enormous yawning void in their souls. Dark shit.
Very dark. On that note,
I actually feel a bit depressed. Fuck.
That's what art can do.
Yeah.
Try art.
Try it. Give it a go.
Its main objective is to create some sense of truth and catharsis, and sometimes when that happens, it makes you feel a bit down in the dumps.
I might have a drink.
Well, you're going out for dinner. Civilized nuclear family dinner.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go home and drink myself to death.
Nice.
No, I'm not. I'm gonna
call me at like midnight, and I'll bring you tummy medication.
And then try and kill me.
Yeah, just try and kill you.
No, I don't know what I'm gonna do tonight. Probably get something from Sainsbury's.
Tell me more.
There's no more. I'm gonna edit the pod. I'm gonna do things I would have done this afternoon.
Yeah.
Tonight, and I might go out to a club as well.
Oh, drop that in casually. That's a whole other.
Yeah, Mark Leckie's DJing at the Colour Factory.
Hito Sterl is going to be.
No, he is, because he is.
I know.
Because he's one of these artists who prefers music to art.
Yeah. Same.
Yeah, like same. Every human being.
Every human being.
But I don't know. Probably won't.
Was that just a soft endorsement for Mark Leckie's show tonight? But by the time this goes out, it would already happen.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's gonna. I probably will get this out before the show, but it's probably sold out anyway. Who cares?
Yeah, we do. Muub Tube does not endorse Mark Leckie or his music.
I don't endorse going to the club in general.
I went last week.
How was it?
It was good. I went to see John Hopkins. It was pretty good. Like, I think because it was a post-COVID situation. I've been to the club twice since COVID, both at the same one. It was a very large venue.
Yeah, it's nice. The listeners getting a window.
Yeah, they're getting a little.
Lives.
You can care about us more now, as you know. We have dreams and goals, but it was good. But I feel tired emotionally from it. I'm looking forward to a relatively chill couple of days.
Yeah. All right. Next time,
that film's done something to it.
It has. It really has. It's really bleeding through the headphones. Next time we will watch a film. Do you have any idea what we'll watch? It's kind of your turn. I feel like
we've been delaying part 4 of our Gazarra season.
Now that is Husbands. Me, you, and Daniel Neofiti attempting to review the late work of Gazarra.
Oh, fuck. We should do it at some point. There's a few things I've been really interested in. Paulé. Recently, which could be interesting.
Daniel
Paulé. I don't know. It would just be us talking about how good Paulé is.
Not necessarily. I found Mediterranean a bit dry.
Mediterranean a bit dry.
Yeah, I was like, this is films for people who like books.
Wait till you see Basset. I forgot Ralph can't read. He can only watch.
I get a bit intimidated by these literary minds.
Paulé is very literary, to be honest. He's very. But
Godard is true cinema.
Godard is true cinema. Godard is anti-literary because all writing about Godard is immensely infuriating and wrong.
True.
So I would think that there's a few options of what we could do, basically.
But we do have to do Godard.
We have to do Godard.
I
bought Werkmeister Harmonies. Recently, so we could do Tar because we've not. I've done a mini Tar. But we could do a full Tar. I don't know if
options. If this was depressing, watch fucking Tar. I think should fucking send us over the age. To put the Samaritan's number at the end.
I like the fact that this week we went for a thematic comparative approach. Maybe.
Yeah, exactly. I think we should do something like that. Watching 2 movies is good energy, and the immediate post movie.
We're gonna review Bond.
No, there's no way you're making me do that. I have never seen a Bond film, and I never will see a Bond film.
That's so funny. That
I'm disgusted by mainstream film culture.
I'm disgusted by mainstream film culture, but it's also so integrated with the English specifically psyche.
All right, Alex Niven.
It's the second time Alex Niven has come up in conversation today for some reason.
Who else does that English psyche stuff?
He's the only one that cares enough.
There are people who do it. There's
bring back Mercia. Bring back Anglo-Saxon county divisions.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Yeah, bye.